Hey, this is Pat Martin, and I always say this, but it's always true. It's been a long time since I've done a DEX video, probably about a year. So I figured I was going to go through DEX 0.9, go through some of the highlights. I'll probably go pretty fast, so we'll be at a pretty brisk pace here. So what I've done in the window here is I went ahead, I created a directory, CD'd into the directory. I did a direct download of the latest copy of DEX on GitHub, and then I'm CDing into the DEX directory, and then on my machine I have about 16 gigs of RAM, so I'm just kicking off the DEX process with 8 gigs of RAM whether I need it or not. So I'm going to go ahead and hit return there, kick it off, and wait for it to come up. There it is, and not exactly in the video window, but that's okay. I'm going to size it appropriately here. Let's see if I can get that right in the window. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into the projects that come with the DEX distribution here, and I'm going to jump into the demo section and the stuff that we usually focus on, which is visualization. So I'm going to load this right here, this garbage collection test suite, and what it's going to do is it's going to load the garbage collection data set. And one of the changes in this version of DEX is instead of the full path stuff that I had going on before, it really wasn't working that well when people would load, when they would have a different path on their machine. So everything's relatively pathed now, so that should work out a lot better for people. So what we're going to do here is we're going to read the GC CSV file. We're going to look at the data. I'm going to go ahead and execute it, and data looks something like this. And then we're going to pick out a handful of columns out of here using the column filter, and we're just going to take a look at it with this area chart over here. And what's nice about this is we can zoom in, we can pan, and stuff like that. We can select particular values that we want to rule out or not see, or not see. And over here we have the bar chart, and again we can do things like zoom in, and we can pan and enable and disable via the legend. The line chart, which is just really more the same, scatter plot, a stacked area chart, which is probably renders a lot nicer for this data because everything is crisp and distinct. And then last but not least, we have the stack bar chart. So again, has all the same capabilities. We can zoom in, we can pan and scroll, stuff like that. So moving on, load this. This is our other C3 data set, which is going to load some sales data, which will just let us see things like the pie chart. Nothing overly exciting there, but it is nice that we can take components out, in and out of consideration here, and then the percentages update. And donut chart, really more the same, really just a pie chart with a hole in the middle. Moving on, let's go out of the C3 stuff and let's move into, I'm going to skip the D3 stuff because most of the stuff is on its way for deprecation in favor of being moved into DEX.js. But I'm going to move into D3 Plus, and we're looking at a data set over here that's really just the Game of Thrones data set. So we're going to do a little ETL over here. We're going to trim the columns, and let's take a look at what that data looks like. So it's a data set I found on the net, and it's Game of Thrones data that basically goes into the order of the battles and who fought who the attacker king was, and who won, who lost, stuff like that. So what I'm doing here is I'm selecting a location, the attacking king, and the defending king, and then we're going to do a little bit of filtering over here using the Groovy filter. We're going to exclude if the attacker king is empty or the defender king is empty, because that that's a data set that really wouldn't make sense to visualize, or at least a data entity that wouldn't make sense. And then we're just going to look at it with the Ring network, which is the D3 Plus component that is integrated into DEX.js here. And what's nice about it is you can see all the different locations and stuff, and then you can select a particular location, and then it will show all the relationships with that particular node, and you can move in, move out, stuff like that. So it's a nice way to see a lot of different relationships between nodes and your data. So I'm going to move on over here and go into the DEX.js stuff. So I'm going to start off with multiples, because this is something that's a little bit new, the way we're handling the multiples, and we now can do multiples with virtually anything. So I'm going to just move through these one by one. So I'm going to start off with dendrogram multiples, and data set we're looking at here is it's kind of a stock data set I use all the time, which is going to show things like the presidents, their parties, and their home state. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm showing the multiples by the party, and each one of these parties is isolated, and you can see the mapping between the home state and which presidents were actually born within that home state. Now, all the multiples within DEX are actually implemented with Gridster, so we can do things like move them around if we don't like the ordering. We can do things like resize the multiple if we want to, and it'll update to use the available space that the chart needs. And each one of these we can still interact with them individually, and so we can see we've got a whole bunch of these. So probably the interesting ones to compare here would be the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, because they have the most going on. So we can resize this, move this over here right next to it. Well, it looks like it's going to act up on me a little bit, and maybe make this a little bigger and look at them side by side. So this is dendrograms, so I'm going to speed it up here and let's look at these. Now it's kind of a heavy visualization, so I'm not running them all at the same time. I'm trying to be a little bit nicer to the machine here. So this is the same visualization, only using chords, and again we can do all the same stuff, move it around, interact with them side by side, resize, etc. Let's see, let me open up this one, disable that, and we'll go ahead and take a look at network multiples. Okay, so this is a pretty interesting one, where it's just going to represent them using the Viz.js network multiples. And again, we can interact with it, do whatever we want, move, resize, all the same stuff that we were doing in the previous ones. Let's see. I'm gonna skip that one. I'm not even sure if that one makes. Well, I'll go ahead. Let me disable this and execute. Yeah, it's kind of like I predicted, because we don't have values here that would cause nodes of different sizes. But clustered force is also a multiple that we support. Let's see. Move on to orbital. Okay, so this is based off of the orbital layout, and over here it basically maps each party into the home state and the particular presidents from each one. So the orange, so we have a central node, everything revolves around, each state is represented by an orange body, and then each president is orbiting that node. So it's kind of nice to show structure. It's kind of an interesting visualization. Not sure what other applicability it might have, but I like it. So next is parallel coordinates. Execute again, and it's just going to lay out the home state and the president, more kind of like a slope graph since we only have two columns here. But if you had more columns, it would happily map them all out. And kind of a interesting interpretation of multiples there. So move on to Sankey, and let's execute this, and same visualization, only using Sankey multiples. And again, we can interact with the chart, move things around. The same thing we can do with a normal Sankey visualization. Sunburst. Let's see, disable that, execute this. And again, goof around with it as much as we want, and move on to tree maps. Execute. And each one of these is an individual tree map multiple, and it's just yet another way to look at things side by side and be able to interact with them and drill down into whatever level of data you want to see. So that's it. That's pretty much it for multiples. Let's see. So I'll move back up into here, and I think I'm going to stay with the president data set because we're familiar with it, and I just want to show some other visualizations that we have here. So let's see. So the next thing I'm going to show is the configurability that I'm working on at this point. So so again, we're reading this president data set. It's actually an uncleansed data set, and we're going to select the party, the home state, and the president. And I'm just going to go ahead and view the core diagram. So it's pretty nice, but it's not quite fitting into the amount of area we have here. It's not exactly the way I want it. So what we can do is we can go over here, and I just right click on the chart, and at this point I've got a handful of the charts that support this. I'm working on the rest. It's just somewhat time consuming to add them one by one, but the chord is supported currently. And what's going to happen here when I select configure is I'm going to get a configuration box here, and I'm going to resize it because I think I'm probably going to need the space. And then I'm just going to go ahead and open it up, and then I can go and I can see the various configuration settings that I have. So I can play around with the top margin. You can see that I'm interacting within JavaFX, and over here to the right in the JavaScript world, it's communicating those settings over to the chart. So I'm going to probably change the bottom margin, give it a little bit extra room because we've got some really long labels here. But let's just go ahead and goof around with this thing a little bit. And I'm going to move the top margin just a little bit more. Boy, that's a long label. And then maybe I'll get out of the chart dimensions, and I can look at some of the other options. We got ability to make it draggable. We've got a transform we could do across the whole chart. We've got auto radius, which will size the radius automatically, or I'm going to turn that off because I want to play around with the inner radius. So over here now I can change that inner radius. I could say, I want the outer radius to be bigger. Probably not. And let's see, I'll just goof around with this just a little bit. I actually don't want the outer radius quite that large, or the inner radius. And then I'll move over here to title. So title, I can do things like, let's say this is presidents. I'll just make that my data set. You can see the text over here in the center. It's not exactly where I want it, so I'm going to change the anchor to be in the middle. And boy, it's kind of hard to see, so I'm going to go over to the font here, and I'm going to change the font size to be I want it to pop. So it's much bigger there, and let's see, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change the fill. Instead of none, let's change it to red, so that really pops now. And maybe I'll go ahead and add some sort of, I don't know, text characteristics, like a text decoration. I'll underline it or overline. That doesn't make sense, but some browsers support Blink, some don't. This one does not. But if you were to select that and view this in the browser that does support it, and I would assume it would blink, we'll go back to the underline, and let's see, what else do we want to play around with before we save this out? So let's see, so we've got the stroke. That's the stroke of the text, so I don't want to do that. We've got other characteristics we can change here. We could change the nodes. Let's see, let me jump back to general. No. Well, this will be fun. Obviously not a super well rehearsed demo, but over here we've got the stroke of the nodes, and we can do things like change the dash array. Let's see, my width is, I can change the width of this. I could change the dash array, and if you look over here, you can see that it's actually getting updated real time. But I really don't want that, so I'm going to go ahead and change the stroke back to nothing, and I'm going to go ahead and save this diagram. Or actually, you know what? I'm going to skip saving it for now, so we can take a look at some other stuff that we have. So what you can do after you make all these changes is you just save the HTML, and then when you view the HTML, it'll be in exactly the same format as you configure the chart over here. So moving on, we'll go ahead and disable that one. Take a look at parallel coordinates and enable this, and let's go ahead and execute it. And again, we can go into here and we can do the configuration, and we see that there's a configuration called parallel coordinates. So we can do things again like mess around with the top margin, and we can see that text size adjusting because it's dynamic as we give more space for that staggered axes label. It grows to expand and fill that space. Let's see, we really need a little bit more space over here to accommodate some of these labels, so I'll just mess around with the left margin, mess around with the right margin, give that a little bit more space. And let's see, other things we could do. Let's see, maybe I don't want to see these semi-ghosted dotted lines, and maybe I want these guys over here to pop a little more. Let's turn this to red, turn this to blue, and let's make these pop a little bit more. So I'm going to go into here, and let's see. So that's going to be the axes label, and I'm going to go ahead and I need more room over here. Make this a little bit bigger. And that's going to be the fill color of the axes label. So let's go ahead and change that over to, I can't remember what color I said, let's just say red, and let's change the tick labels over to blue. Let's see, where is blue? Right there, right in front of my face here. So that's popping a little bit better, and I'm going to go over here and let's see, the selected links, I'm going to change the stroke on those guys to be a lot thicker. So I'm going to just go ahead and say, make that really pop there. And whenever I select these, even though it's not too distracting, I don't want to see them at all. So I'm just going to make those disappear. So that's going to be under unselected links. and that'll be, I could do this in a couple of different ways. I could either make the opacity go down to nothing, or I could just say the width of the stroke is nothing. So now when I select it, all I see is what I selected. So I kind of like that, and that's basically how some of the different ways we could change the way the default chart visualizes itself. So that's some of the stuff I've been focused on, which is total configurability of all the charts and an ability to really render it WYSIWYG exactly the way you want to see it. Let's see. So next one I'm going to go into is going to be what I call a combo chart. So again, we're gonna take that same data set, we're going to execute this, and that went ahead and ran. So I'm going to get rid of this configuration window, and what we can see here is we have a parallel coordinates that's driving a chord diagram. So what's nice about this is we have interactivity. So if I want to see the Whigs in a Democratic Party, I just select them here, and then my chord diagram updates based on the selection on the chart to the left. If I want to see Missouri, then I can see Harry S. Truman was from Missouri and a member of the Democratic Party. So another thing we can do is we can also go into the configuration, and what we see is we have two accordion controls here, one for parallel coordinates and one for the chord diagram. So depending on our data, we may want more room for one or the other. So we have total control over things like hey, I want to change the top margin, so I can give a little bit more room for that top margin, or a little bit less, whatever you need. Maybe I want to compress the left margin. You can see it all moving as I select it. So again, you have all the configurability, even when you have multiple charts, and you can save that off into its own individual HTML page. So let's see, disable that, and I'm going to just go ahead and let's just take a look at a few more of these combo charts real quick. So I'm going to go ahead and execute these, and I'm going to, as you can see, I'm going to select all four at a time, and when I do this, the window is going to partition itself so I can see all four simultaneously, and as I execute it, we're going to see each one of these windows populate as the data gets rendered. Let's see. Oh yeah, the network one takes a little bit of time, so that's what we're waiting on to see here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and let's just look at the parallel coordinates to Sankey. It looks like I accidentally selected some stuff there. So kind of a nice visual, because we can quickly look at relationships. Let's see, if I want to see Democrats from New York and Tennessee, there we go. I can go over here and interact with it. Or maybe I want to see this rendered in a network diagram. So I will be a little bit patient here, and I'm going to go ahead and select Democrats once that renders. So we can click that, and then we'll see that this network diagram is going to update with all the relationships with the Democratic Party. So let's see, Democrats from Tennessee. We can zoom in, we can pan it, take a look. So Democrats from Tennessee, Andrew Jackson and James K. Polk. Let's see. Next is parallel coordinates to tree map. Really more of the same. Parallel coordinates to sunburst. Okay, so next thing I'm going to take a look at is going to be the tree map bar chart. So got a data set, crime state by state, and this data, I'm going to execute it, looks like this. We got the state, the type of crime, the year, and the number of crimes that were committed that particular year. So what we're going to do, we're going to select state, crime, type of crime, year, and count, and we're going to filter out anything. Oh, okay, so what we're doing here is we're including only when the year is modulus 10. So basically, we're only including every decade. So when I go ahead and I execute this, we're going to see that we're 1960, 1970, 1980. This is really just because we don't have enough real estate here to accommodate more. So we're just trying to work around our limited constraints here, not include 1961 through 69. Instead, we'll just look at it decade by decade. So really nice visual, I think, because it's able to show multiple dimensions at once. So we get the multi-dimensional capabilities of a tree map laid out in a bar chart, and we're coloring each division by I believe the type of crime, and we've got the main categories of crime to the left and to the right, and then we can also zoom into a particular division. So if we want to take a look at Minnesota, we could just zoom in, and then it updates everything relative to what I just selected. So I think it's a really powerful visual if your data set is, I guess the word is compatible with this type of visual. It's a really nice way to take a look at it. So kind of playing this, kind of winging this. So let's see, what else do we want to show here? Motion bar chart. Let's see. Looks like okay. And here's another good thing is we have the ability to add documentation, and I've really tried to make the buttons pop a little bit more. I had way too much white and gray going in the color scheme before. So what we can do here is we can, when we create a flow, when we create a set of tasks, we can self-document. We can and should document. Looks like I got the caps lock on. So you just simply go into the editor, you change the documentation, then you can view it in the HTML viewer. And it's a nice way to describe what your flow is doing and to put the documentation into the flow itself. So here's what we're doing here. So we're reading a CSV of this births and deaths. We're creating a table, because that's one of the nice things that DEX can do is you take a data set, you can read that data into an in-memory database, is what we're doing in this case, into something called HyperSQL. And we're just stuffing into a table called CSV, and then it gives us the power of SQL at that point. So then we can do things like select the country abbreviation, the year, and a population from CSV. We're not using a lot of the power of CSV in that case, or of SQL in that case, but still, in some cases, when you want to do things like ordering, groupings, sums, and stuff like that, it really comes in handy. So over here, we can just take a quick look at what that data looks like, and it's just really a series of country abbreviations, the year, and then the population count at that point in time. So the visual looks like this. So you can scroll through the years by moving over the what's the word I'm looking for? The title label over here, and you can see the change over time. So if we wanted to take a look and say, well, show me what year 2000 looked like. A little bit tricky to get that thing on 2000. A little too tricky. But there we go. And then Afghanistan, 1.35 times 10 to the 7th. Maybe I should pay a little attention to the format of the label, but that's the way that is for now. And essentially, you can see country by country, size by population, and then the time dimension over here. Let's see, and really this is just more of the same. Let's see. Okay, so I think I'm kind of running out of time here, but let me go ahead and I'll just show a quick view of this. I'm starting to integrate some of the eCharts stuff, and nothing too exciting here. It's just the eCharts bubble chart. They have a lot of really interesting visualizations. I think pretty powerful visualizations. They're not D3 based, but to me what's important is the power of the visual, not necessarily the underlying technology. And I think eCharts is really a fantastic package. Let's see. Elegans, I'm not going to show that one. Okay, so over here we've got the Google timeline, so I'm going to load the OJ Simpson data, and then we'll just go ahead and we'll just take a look at that real quick. And what this does is it's going to lay out a particular event. It's going to show the start and stop time and graph it out based on the duration. And it can handle a pretty significant number of events. And this is just kind of showing the way the events laid out for the O.J. Simpson trial. And let's see, word trees. Love these word trees. So this is actually, we've got a poem here, an Edgar Allan Poe poem that I've input via a text input component. And then I'm just filtering out some garbage. So if the line is of 0 length, then I'm just going to filter it out. And then I'm filtering out preceding white space, stuff like that. Double quotes. Looks like, not sure what that is, but whatever it is, it was causing me some trouble. And there's a special character that was embedded in there. And then essentially we take those sentences and then we can graph it out, and then we can see the connections to the left, to the right. So what's going to happen with this visual is just going to look at the word frequency, and the most frequent word is going to be the centerpiece of the start of the document. So from there you can do things like, well, let me see what connections the word out has. Well, not too many. But then you can just kind of explore around, take a look at that, this, that, the other. And it's kind of an interesting way to take a look at how different words are being connected, and sometimes it can be pretty insightful as well. So I'm going to move on again. That's the Google stuff. MVD3. Let's see. I'm going to go with the bubble chart sales real quick, and what this is really showing is going to be sales data for a year's worth of time. Let's see, January through December, and then we can scroll over. We can take a look at what the sales were at that point in time. We can turn points on and off, and it's basically your standard MVD bubble chart. Let's see, stacked area. Let's see, I guess we'll do defense budgets. Not sure if that's going to be the best one to get the point across, but maybe not. Okay, so this view, we can take a look at it stacked. We can look at the stream data, and it really looks like population dominates, so we can't even see the other stuff until we take population out of there, because that's such a dominant number versus all the things we're looking at here. So this is a stream view, and it looks like this spike over here on paramilitary is really dominating. So I'm gonna take that out. Let me take out the total force and maybe just pick a couple of things to take a look at side by side. Let's see, take the GDP out, and then we can look at these things side by side. Let's see, Italy, Ireland, Iran, and then we can move to the expanded view. In expanded view, you see all of these is expressed as a percentage versus one another. So maybe for this data set that doesn't make sense, but there's a lot of data sets that it does make sense. So what if these were sales numbers and the numbers at top were the sales people? It would be interesting to know that Bob got 33% of the sales versus Susan, who only got 12%, and and Billy, who might have only got 5%. So interesting ways to look at the data. And let's see, back to visualization, and let's see the Plotly view. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but it uses Plotly, has the ability to look at data on a map over time. Needs a little bit of attention over here on the player component, but what we can do is we can actually hit play, and you can see the frames being updated over here, and you can see the axes updated, but the populations haven't really changed enough to really make a big difference in the graph update so far. So it's my data set really isn't ideal to show. There hasn't been a population change to be able to make this darker. I need to find a better example there, but what this is really a time-based chloropleth. And let me see, prefuse, I'm going to skip that one. Okay, UML. So back to the Game of Thrones data. So Game of Thrones, and again we're looking at attacker king, defender king, and location. So what we're doing here is we're going to take a look at that same battle in terms of a UML class diagram. So what this is going to do is it's going to draw relationships between the attacking king and the defending king, and it's going to connect them by the location. So this is what that data set looks like graphed out into a class diagram. Then a sequence diagram, same thing. So we can see Jeffrey fought Robb Stark at Golden Tooth, at Mummers Ford, River Run. So this is really a sequence diagram view of that particular data. Maybe you have data that has relationships in a label that would indicate what that relationship was. Well, a sequence diagram may be a very nice way to visualize that. So let's see, let me open this up and let me see if I have missed anything important. The 0.9 release, so a lot of visualization changes, and it's hopefully focused on making it a lot more usable, and also I've paid a lot more attention to things like the packaging of the different tutorials. Now I'm a little shy of having a lot of tutorials yet, but I'm working on it. So tutorial 1 goes into reading data, reads the president data, describes the data, which can be a very nice utility to be able to get to know a data set pretty quickly. So when you execute it, it's going to tell you, well, in column 0, its name is presidency. It's got 44 distinct values. It has 44 that qualify as strings, 44 that qualify as doubles, and 44 that qualify as integers. Now, that's the number of the presidency right there, so obviously they can be a string. They are distinct because it's an ascending sequence, and they can either be a double or integer. Now, president, the name of the president, each one's distinct. None of them can be doubles, and none of them can be integers. So it's just really a nice way to get a high-level understanding of a lot of data. Now, step 2, visualizing data. So this tutorial just goes into reading it and visualizing it as a dendrogram. And so that's the tutorial, so I'm working on expanding that. And then we've already been through a lot of the visualizations, and then there's another section here for different programming languages, and another one for common tasks. So things like ETL cleansing data, things like how to use an in-memory database. So, and I talked about that a little bit before, but in this case, we really start to use a little bit more of the power of that of the the SQL capability here. So again, it's got full documentation, and we're basically just doing a bunch of ETL. So we read the data set here. It's a fairly messy data set, so we trim it. We view the data just as kind of a checkpoint. And then we rename one of the columns because it was not SQL friendly, because you can't start a SQL column name off with a number. So we rename that, and then we remove the commas, the percentages, and view the data. Again, after making those changes, it just kind of is a visual checkpoint. Select the columns we care about: country, defense, and GDP in millions, our renamed column. And then we create the database over here. We call it a table called defense, and then we go ahead and we query the database. And in here, we're just really looking for the countries that have more than 10,000 million. So what number is that? So that would be 10 billion in a defense budget. So countries with over 10 billion in defense budget, and we're ordering it descending by the GDP in millions. So we end up with a short list of countries there from a lot of data, and essentially this is the graph that we end up with, and it's this is looking at it in a C3 view, so we can do all that zooming in and taking a look at stuff like individual countries and such. And stack bar chart here, we can see GDP versus the defense budget. So there you have it. So I think at this point that's going to be a wrap. I think that's enough introduction into DEX, and I really hope that this video and the audio work, because I really don't want to do this again. Anyway, that's it for now, and let me know if there's any questions in particular, or anything that you guys would like me to cover in greater depth in one of these sessions. Thanks a lot. Bye.